Welcome to Moments with Marianne, and a very special Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. We have a very special show just for you with Dr. Warren-Farrell, and he's here today to talk with us about his book, The Boy Crisis, Why Our Boys Are Struggling and What We Can Do About It. Now, Dr. Farrell has been on the show before to talk about the boy crisis, and today we're taking a deep dive into what this means for fathers, parents, and caretakers. So Dr. Warren was chosen by Financial Times as one of the top 100 thought leaders and the Center for World Spirituality in 2011 as one of the world's spiritual leaders. His books are published in over 50 countries and in 15 languages. So let's welcome to the show Dr. Warren-Farrell.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to our time together.
Oh, what a joy it is to have you here. And gosh, since the last time we've had you on, you have been all over the place with this book. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been. I was mentioning to you before the call that after 11 years of working on it, isolated at the desk, it's kind of fun to be able to see what comes out of my mouth when I try to summarize 11 years of work.
Well, and so with all the interviews you're doing now, where do you think that people are really kind of honing in when they do talk to you about your book, The Boy Crisis? What are some of the things that they're really kind of focusing on?
Well, I think a lot of a lot of the people that interview me really do follow where I take the lead from to a large degree, and so the understanding that the boy crisis is global is the first sort of major thing, that it's that in all the 60 developed countries it's been boys are falling significantly behind girls, both in academia and also in social intelligence, emotional intelligence, and social skills, in physical health, and so it's been very and in mental health also, particularly in mental health, and so it's been a very and then there's the curiosity about why that's the case, and the looking at the fact that developed nations have a much greater likelihood to have permission for divorce, and also much greater permission for women having children without being married, and that both of those tend to lead to this huge gap between the relatively small percentage of those populations that have a lot of father involvement and those children who do have a lot of father involvement doing very well, and then the children that have minimal or no father involvement doing very poorly, and the boy crisis really rests among those that large group of children today in most developed nations that have minimal or no father involvement, or the father is just involved in the earning money process and doesn't have any real say in terms of the parenting at home process, and so that's there are 10 causes of the boy crisis that I talk about, but that is the cause that I eventually ended up realizing was the most pivotal.
Well, it's interesting. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because a lot of times you have, at least I know quite a few people, and I've chatted with a lot of people that have dads that are 100% devoted to bringing home an income and working, that the family doesn't really see them too often, and just the impact that has on the family.
Yes, now those children don't do as badly as children who have minimal or no father involvement, and then, but they do much worse than children that have traded, whose fathers have traded money for time. And so my own son-in-law sort of talked with me about this, and he's, he gave up a 50% increase in his in the work that he was doing in terms of pay to be able to get home earlier to have more time with my grandson. And I thought that was just, he sort of checked in with me, as because that meant that they're not going to be able to buy as nice a home as they would be able to buy for their first home. But the truth is that there are a relatively small number of children, and boys especially, who go to a psychologist and say, gee, I only grew up in a one-bedroom home versus a two-bedroom home, or and I really feel psychologically destroyed by that, versus the number of boys that go to a psychologist and say, I just never felt I could get my father's approval. I never really sensed, he seemed very distant from me. I didn't really know who he was. I didn't get good guidance as to how to navigate becoming both myself on the one hand, but also having the types of skills that dads bring to fathering, like boundary enforcement and encouragement to go beyond my comfort zone, and and therefore I feel I'm not very good at discipline because I didn't have that boundary enforcement, or I'm not very good at transitions because I wasn't encouraged to go out of my comfort zone. Those are the things that enter into the psychologist's office, not that I unless the amount of money the father brought in or the mother brought in and the father combined was so minimal that you couldn't have food above and beyond that issue, or a roof over one's head to begin with. Once you're beyond that sort of basics being taken care of, then the amount of time that that a boy has with his father is by far the most important ingredient.
Well, and you talked about just seeing a psychologist, so what some of these young boys are having to deal with. What are some of the implications when we talk about how this correlates with any type of mental illness or self-control issues?
Yes, here's maybe a good example of the slippery slope that happens when we don't understand what fathers bring to and contribute to the family. The dads, for example, will do very likely do roughhousing with the children, both boys and girls, especially boys. And moms will oftentimes be cooking, maybe making some dinner or something like that, and looking over and going, "Yikes! Jim, our husband, his name, let's say, is Jim," and she goes, "Jim, be careful. Don't have the kids too close to the coffee table. Don't have them too, don't be running around so quick with them. They could bang into something." And then she's thinking inside of her head, "Oh my God, he's just like one more child. It's like I thought I had 3 children, but in fact I have 4, and I have to monitor him and to keep the children safe. But on the other hand, the kids seem to be having a lot of fun, and oh well, I'll just monitor him and make sure he doesn't get too carried away like the kids do." And the dads just are doing this naturally, and almost no father that I'm aware of, and this is, I think, very important for Father's Day, is for fathers to be able to talk about what they contribute, why what they do contributes. And so very few fathers know that children who have a lot of roughhousing are far more likely to be able to make a distinction between what is being aggressive versus what is being assertive. And so without knowing that, moms don't realize the emotional benefits of the distinction between assertiveness and aggressiveness, which is so instrumental in life, is happening. So she doesn't have the chance to hear that and know that and integrate that into her worries, and so, or her lack of worries. And so then the next thing that happens, taking this down this slippery slope, is that the dad who is roughhousing with the child is creating a bond with the son or the daughter, because the kids love doing this, and the kids feel like the dad is like a roller coaster. He's giving them great excitement, but also he's watching out for their safety as well. And so the kids yearn to do more of this. And so the dad then usually, the great majority of dads almost unconsciously use this bond to enforce boundaries. They go like, okay, now, no more roughhousing until you finish your homework and get ready for bed, and brush your teeth, etc. And so the kids go, all right, I'll brush my teeth real quickly and do my homework real quickly. And then Dad goes over the homework and says, this was sloppy, go back, do it again, not until and so on. And then, the bedtime is 9 o'clock, and if you haven't done your homework, etc., by then, that's your problem. And secondly, if you do get it done ahead of time, the time between when you get everything done and bedtime, that's my time to do your time to ask me to do anything you want between those two times. And so the kids rush to get to bed earlier. Now what happens is, now what we know is that children, predominantly being taken care of by their dads, they have bedtimes that the dads set later than the mom's bedtimes, but the children get to bed earlier with the dad than they do with the mom. And so what's the reason for that is that the dads are far more likely to enforce that boundary. So the kids will say to the mom at 9 o'clock, let's say the bedtime is, and the kids will say, oh, Mom, I haven't done my homework yet. And Mom will think, well, gee, I don't want my Billy or Joanne to go to school without their homework done. Okay, sweetie, you can stay up and do your homework a little bit longer, but try to do it quickly. And so then, whereas Dad is more likely to say, you had the opportunity to do the homework before. Now it's 9 o'clock. Now bedtime takes over, and you've lost all your. And no, I gave you I told you I'd play with you or do whatever you want. If you got stuff done, everything done before that, you didn't, and so you lose that also. And so the combination of the bond plus dads being much more likely to enforce the boundaries they set at precisely the time or whatever the conditions are that they set, leads to the child doing, both boy and girl children, being much more likely to focus on getting done what she or he needs to do in order to get what she or he wants to have. Getting done the homework in order to get done to get more roughhousing. And so so here's where the slippery slope really begins. The child that doesn't know how to focus on doing what she or he really needs to do is far more likely to have ADHD. So children that brought up predominantly by dads are only 15% likely to have ADHD. Brought up predominantly by moms, 30% likely to have that. Now, if you look at how that happens, the child brought up predominantly by the dad is learning how to focus on its attention on doing what has to be done. So you take that into the school system, and the boy in particular, who's already likely to be more fidgety than the girl, than his sister is likely to be more distracted by text, more distracted by a new video game, program software that has come on, is available, and be not focused on the homework, not focused on doing what she or he has to do. And so then the boy in particular, who starts valuing as he gets older his ability to perform, starts becoming more and more ashamed of himself that he isn't performing well. The other kids are getting better grades, or if he wants to be some type of athlete, he's not able to focus on doing all the routines that are necessary to build his athletic prowess. And so he starts becoming, feeling he's a bit of a loser. And under many circumstances, he starts withdrawing and being alienated because he doesn't want to be rejected by his peers who are not treating him with the same respect as they are with the ones that do have that ability to focus. And so he starts off in withdrawing into video games and then ultimately becoming addicted to video games. When it comes to male-female time, he doesn't feel like the girls are really that interested in losers like he is, or he sees himself as being. So he starts getting involved, getting physical releases by focusing on porn. But the more he focuses on porn, the more his dopamine is dependent upon increasingly risky behaviors that the pornography takes him to. And then when he gets involved with a real girl, she feels like she's just being treated as some type of do this, do that to get me excited, and feels very very objectified and minimized and not really seen. And so she withdraws from him, which only convinces him that that he really is not doing well with girls and needs to do more porn to take care of himself. And so that whole process starts. And in worst case scenarios, he can become significantly depressed. In very worst case scenarios, suicidal. But as we know, boys by the age of in their early 20s commit suicide at almost 6 times the rate of girls. And in the super worst case scenarios, it can turn into such anger at the boys and girls at school, the teachers at school, the people that never really acknowledge the beautiful, sensitive person that he is, and that anger can lead to, in worst case scenarios, even to school shootings.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. You can see how that spirals out of control, and it's all so related, and your research is done so well to really point out some of the things that are the key factors to look for. But what I love about your book also, it gives people the resources on what they can do now to kind of turn some of that around.
Yes, I think that's the most important thing. And one of the first things, is that dads need to study and understand, that what happens when they're involved. And men, as a rule, tend to do almost anything if they feel needed. The really clear evidence for that is that historically speaking, boys and men, when they felt that they were needed in war, were needed to possibly die. They were willing to risk their lives, go to war, and millions die for the purpose of making sure we didn't, we're not under Nazi rule or not being, doing whatever that generation's war said that was an important purpose. And men were oftentimes willing to do, if you ask a man, we'd say today that, men earn more money than women do, and so therefore they have male privilege, but the average coal miner, truck driver, logger, men are 93% of the hazardous professionals, and they didn't do more coal mining because they had male privilege. They did more coal mining because they had male obligation. And male obligation, when a man felt that he was needed to earn the money for his family, he went out there historically and supplied that money no matter what, no matter how dangerous it was or how much he did not like driving a cab in inner city for 70 hours a week, which is the very typical of the amount of hours a cab driver drives a cab for. And these were not male privilege from his perspective. These were male obligations, male expectations, male duty to what you do to serve your family, not to serve yourself. And and so these were what dads need to know is that they are needed, and they really won't know that they're needed until 2 things happen. One is they see what they contribute, articulate that, have a dialogue with their wife about what they contribute by somewhat uniquely usually to being a father, and the mother has a chance to dialogue about what she contributes, and you have what I call checks and balance parenting. And so I hope what I do in the Boy Crisis book is give the dozen or so differentiating behaviors that dads and moms tend to contribute, and help and many examples of how those can be brought to the family table. And I hope that I think one of the most important contributions of the book is, how to structure family dinner nights in such a way that that a constructive dialogue that respects everybody's input can be consistent, so that the children become secure in knowing how to express feelings about whatever they're worried about and have their feelings listened to as opposed to disconnected from. And so those are family dinner nights are a very good idea, but they can become family dinner nightmares if you don't have the guidelines to know how to conduct them effectively with your family.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how something so simple, is structured correctly, could have such a great impact.
Yes, and it really is, you see this with boys in particular, and girls too. If you listen to a girl or a boy talk with their girlfriends and boyfriends, their same-sex friends, you'll often hear them, sort of joking and talking pretty in pretty elaborate ways, and then you talk to them, you ask them about that question at dinner, and they may just give a very brief answer to that. That's a good hint that your children feel like they're more likely to be judged by you and lectured by you, where they don't feel that same feeling. They feel more, females especially tend to support each other in whatever they're saying, whatever they're expressing their feelings about. If girls break up from a boyfriend, the other girls will say, "Oh yeah, I saw that problem with him too. Really, you're much better than he is. I'm glad you're moving on." That type of thing. Whereas with the parents, they're often more likely to get a critical analysis before the parents listen, and it's ultimately important for parents to give input that have some values to them, but not before the listening process is much greater than most parents allow for. And so, and the other issue too is the relationship between the parents and the children around the issue of who's in charge. And sometimes parents will come up to me and say, "I'm so frustrated because we can have dinner together, just like you talk about the importance of dinner nights, but the children bring the kids bring electronics to the table." And the second I hear that, I know that the children are in charge of the parents. It is possible to say there will be no dinner until you take those electronics and take them away from the table. And if they aren't taken away from the table, or the kids retrieve them, to make sure that those the electronics are not returned to the children, for a specific period of time. And so we've oftentimes cared so much and been so sensitive to our children's desires that we allow their wants to take place of what we know is best for them in the long run. And so there's a lot of, but yet on the other hand, hearing the children's perspectives and points of view is really important to be balanced with that. And I think one of the things I discovered in the process of doing the research for the boy crisis was seeing the degree to which there used to be a purpose for boys, and the boys had two purposes basically. One was to be willing to be disposable in war, and the social bribe for boys being disposable was to call them heroes, to praise them playing football, to praise them doing dangerous things, so that they would prepare themselves to be a hero and to be willing to be disposable at war in exchange for being called a hero and being recognized and respected. And so that gave boys in the old days a sense of purpose, or being a sole breadwinner. And today we need fewer men to die in war, and we need fewer men to be sole breadwinners because women are often sharing that burden. And so the good news is that we have less demand on boys for that type of sense of purpose. The bad news is we have a purpose void, and so that purpose void is needed more than ever to be filled in by the guidance of a father. In the past, if the father was missing, let's say he was killed at war, he was at least, the boy knew from the culture what he was supposed to do to get respect, love, admiration, and approval. Today, it's not as clear. Very few boys have generals as role models. Since the last ones, if you were born after Eisenhower, you don't have a general as a role model. And if you were born in recent years, you know that women can share the breadwinning role. So now the sense of purpose is very different. It's a balancing act between discovering your unique self and what you'll be fulfilled and motivated by on the one hand, and on the other hand, to be able to understand how to do what you need to do, and how to do what makes money, so that you contribute to being able to handle your family's financial needs. And so if you choose something that is fulfilling, understanding that as a rule, the more fulfilling a job is, the less it pays. People always say, find your dream and you'll take, and it will take care of you, type of thing. Not true. The great majority of people who find their dream, it's usually a dream of writing, acting, being an artist, and we call people starving artists for a reason. We call most actors waiter, and so if you have a fulfillment occupation, you want to be an 18th century literature, French literature specialist, or an art historian, the chances are fairly good you will not be able to get a job, or you will not be able to make a great deal of money doing that. If you're not interested in that and you're willing to get up at 3 in the morning and collect garbage, there are more people that need their garbage picked up than need a new piece of art on their wall with an interpretation from you. And so what the father's job is to sort of say, yes, sweetie, you have this wonderful gift, so can you make use of it? But the only way you're ever going to make use of a fulfillment-oriented gift is to be enormously disciplined in knowing how to make a living from that, knowing how to create a business from that, and that takes making sure you're in the upper 5 or 6% of people who do that, acting, that being an artist, and so on, because that's only my father for years told me, he saw that I had what he felt was a gift in writing, but he said, you can't be a full-time writer. You can't make a responsible living doing that. And it wasn't until I got my third advance that he, sort of shifted and said, okay, maybe you've allowed yourself to be in that 5% that will be able to make a living doing that.
Dr. Farrell, on that note, we are going to pause here for a quick break. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, and again, our special guest today has been Dr. Warren Farrell as we talk about his best-selling book, The Boy Crisis. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge, teaching beyond conventional wisdom. Her work is described as life-changing. Visit JudyGoodman.com. That's JudyGoodman.com.
Comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute ruin and brought to this incredibly freeing place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours was real. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
There are nearly 2 million Americans living with amputation. Many live right here in San Antonio. Becoming an amputee can be scary, frustrating, isolating, but there's no reason to feel alone. The San Antonio Amputee Foundation is here to help support you and guide you toward resources such as home and car modifications and even prosthetic limbs. For more information or to make a donation, visit saamputee.org. We'll help you live a full, active life, one step at a time. San Antonio Amputee Foundation, healing limbs, hearts, and souls.
welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We've been talking with Dr. Warren-Farrell in regards to his new book, The Boy Crisis, Why Our Boys Are Struggling and What We Can Do About It. Now, Dr. Farrell, I know before we went to break we were talking about how we can help our boys find their career path. I know this can be a very confusing time, not only for the parents, but also for the boys, as they try to define what their purpose in life should be.
Yes, it's both, and that's it should be confusing, and that's why if you are not confused between the amount you want to fulfill yourself and really enjoy your life and the amount that you want to take responsibility, especially once you have children. These are not huge decisions if you don't have children, but the moment you contemplate having children, because it's much easier to be able to sustain yourself being a philosopher if you don't have children. I mean, one of the reasons such a high percentage of our philosophers historically and our artists and so on have been gay is because they could they didn't have to worry about doing something that produced enough income to support their family, unless they were from wealthy, propertied families, and so the confusion is the wonderful thing. The confusion creates the potential for curiosity if you have guidance. But if a father is not there doing the types of things that a father will tend to do, like you fell down on the ski slope, mom will be more likely to say, and you're trying out for the ski team, let's say, mom will often come over and see if you've broken a leg and say, sweetie, you can always quit the ski team. It's okay. It's not a big thing. Don't worry about it. You don't feel pressure on that. And dad will tend to be more likely to say, just go up and do it again. Here's what did you do wrong? Figure out what you did wrong. How are you going to change that the next time? And not even hold open the option of quitting the ski team, because dad is more likely to encourage the child to go beyond its comfort zone to the next level. Another frequent example that comes up, I'll hear parents say to me, and I talk about this in the Boy Crisis book too, is that I have parents say to me something along the lines of, my son came home from school and he's in third grade, and he said his teacher Mrs. Myers didn't like him, and so and the mom will listen to the child cry about how much Miss Myers doesn't like him, and will be more likely to say, well, sweetie, I really hear that's a problem for you. I'll give the principal a call tomorrow, and I'll have a meeting with her, and we'll see if we can get you a teacher that you will really like. And the mom is thinking in the back of her mind, I don't want my son to have a bad experience at school at a very primal, pivotal, foundational age. And dad will be more likely to say something like, sweetie, in life you have people that you need to be able to get along with people that you don't like and that maybe you don't even feel like you. So what can you do that's different that you think would make Miss Myers like you better, but yet would also be good for you? And so that dialogue, and so before he volunteers to have that dialogue with the principal to change the teacher, he's more likely to suggest that the boy or his daughter make some changes in behavior and experiment with that and see how that works, and then maybe even have a meeting with Miss Myers to see what her perspective on it is and bring her perspective to the son or the daughter, and the daughter or son's perspective to Miss Myers, and have the four of them all get together in a conference and talk it through, and then maybe do something about it. But the father will be more likely to be fine, to feel like it's important for the child to move out of his or her comfort zone. Now, the right answer is not one versus the other. The children that I found do the best and that are least likely to be in boy crisis mode are ones that have this checks and balances of understanding what the value of the security and protectiveness and the nurturance that moms are more likely on average to offer, and that pushing the child out of the comfort zone, and yet being there as a safety net if it goes too far, that the dads tend to offer. And so for the mom and dad to know how to communicate about these things without making the other wrong, that is one of the primal differentiators between the parents that eventually have divorces, or alternatively, the parents that in which the father just decides that the only way he can get respected in the family is to go off and earn money and just drop out of the process of checks and balance parenting.
Mm-hmm. Being involved there. Well, and so this kind of leads me to my next question for you. So what ways have the feminist movement impacted what it's doing to our boys?
Well, the good news is that the feminist movement has produced this huge percentage of women and girls who are becoming their own person, who are saying to themselves, do I want children at all? Am I heterosexual at all? Let me discover who I am, and let me be who I want to be. If I want to be a full-time mom, no shame in that. If I want to be full-time, becoming an executive of a major company or an inventor or whatever, I can do that. And there's encouragement at every level, from parents to guidance counselors to teachers. There's the confrontation of teachers in schools that discourage that in any way, shape, or form. And so that is, and there are girls being encouraged to prepare for that in ways they don't even know they're preparing for that. Playing team sports, playing in, trying out in gymnastics and individual sports. These are happening in ways that certainly were not happening when I was growing up, and girls are having these enormous benefits from the feminist movement in this regard. The challenge with the feminist movement has been that while valuing girls and women to a great degree and expanding their options, it has undervalued the family and often demonized men and boys, but particularly men. And so, but without even realizing that by the demonization of men, that I'll explain more in a minute, that a boy looks up to the men in his life as who he will become. So the demonization of men is actually the demonization of our boys in terms of discouraging them from being motivated to be the type of man that feels like he can be valued and respected. And so, this has happened in a few different ways that this has occurred. One is that by encouraging female freedom, and that we've had the huge 53%, to be more precise, 53% of women who have children when they're under 30 have children without being married, because women were encouraged to be free to do whatever they wanted to do. They learned that, and that marriage was considered often a patriarchal institution that benefited men and oppressed women. All of this type of attitude toward men and the family, the demonization of men, the undervaluing of the family, has led to a large number of women saying, I'm getting to be rearing age. I don't have a man in my life that I really like or love, so I'll just have children of my own. And maybe I'm living with a man, but even among the people who make the decision to have children alone, the emphasis has been so much on the female freedom that no one was saying to women, you have the absolute freedom to make the choice of whether or not to have the child, but the moment you make the free choice to have the child is the moment you give up your freedom to do whatever you want in exchange for your responsibility to do what the children need first. And so if she gets a divorce, it's not, now you have the freedom, emphasis on freedom, to be able to get divorced, go to out of state, find a new with a new man that you feel is a better father and a better husband for you, who has maybe a better job in a better area, and so you move out of state with him without any understanding of the fact that what we now know is that children who move away from their biological father, even if their stepfather would be objectively considered a better parent, that those children, especially the boys, do much, much worse. And so that's not about female freedom. Female freedom is doing whatever you want with your child. But female responsibility is once you take on that responsibility to have the child, then you put the responsibility above your freedom. It's the child's future that is the important future. And so once you've made that decision. And so that's what the feminist movement has not put an emphasis on. And so very frequently, a lot of the shows that I do, the conservative shows politically are far quicker to see that than the liberal ones are sort of more like, wait a minute, if father involvement is so important, this may take away from our freedom to divorce and go wherever we want to, or our freedom to have children without being married. Are you saying fathers are that important? And the answer, that I found, even though I was on the board of directors of the National Organization for Women, and the beginnings of these findings that I began to put forth, made me much less popular, and lost a huge amount of money from, starting to articulate these things. That's the truth. And if we really want to take responsibility for caring, then as I said, there are 10 different causes for the boy crisis, but the single most important one is understanding what the difference is between fathering and mothering, what the male contributions are, as well as the female contributions that we already are aware of.
Well, I think a lot of people, I'm so glad that you've done this research and you're talking about this, because a lot of people don't really consider the male and female roles that contribute to raising a child. They just figure, well, I'll take this on, or we'll be fine. And in some cases, I guess when you have maybe a parent that's unfit, that can be, I think, something that could be considered, or is it that they look to develop a new family dynamic? How does that work?
Yes, first of all, I really want to support moms here in two ways. One is, before I got married to the woman who I got married to, I went out with a great many women in the 20 years between my marriages, who were, almost all the women I went out with were mothers, single moms, and they were among the hardest working people I've ever met. And they were juggling everything and trying to do a good job with their work, and at the same time do a good job with raising their children. They were conscientious, they were caring, and often, but they didn't often know, and I didn't know at the beginning of this process either, exactly what they were often saying, well, my husband, my ex does not really pay that careful attention. And I'd say, well, give me an example. And they'd say, well, for example, he brought my son to the playground, the school playground, about a mile away, and then what he did is he went back and watched rather than stay there at the playground with him, he went back and watched the NFL game, and so and rather than stay there and watch him. And what happened, Warren, is he got my son got into a big fight during a basketball game, and he wouldn't have gotten into that fight if my ex had been there to protect him. And so, but the dads, so from the mom's perspective, it seems like the dad is not responsible, reliable, and is just sort of more interested in the football game than their son. And so that becomes a reason for that mom to sort of not trust that he should have more time with the child that he neglects. The father has a totally different view on it, but is very bad usually at expressing that. And the father's perspective is usually, once articulated, is something like this. Yes, he got into a big fight there, and so I want to be able to not only, I want him to be able to have had that fight when he's now in third grade, rather than not knowing how to make the decisions that would avoid that fight later in life. So, well, what do you mean by those decisions? Well, I want to work with my son after he gets into a fight and use it as a teachable moment to say things like, what were the red flags that you saw over there? Was it, in one case where I was talking to a mom about this, the dad about this, he said that the son said, well, I asked to join a game that was already underway, and the kid was in high school, but they said they were drinking, and they were underage, and they when I first joined and I missed a couple of shots, they were mocking me, and they were seeming to have more fouling practice than real practice. And so the father was able to work with the son to pick up all these red flags of what was going to be likely to lead to a situation where he could potentially get into a fight with a bunch of quasi-bullies. And so the father's perspective is, I want that when the son goes over and enters into a new situation, his antenna goes up to see whether he is in a safe situation, or and how we can change that. And the father wants to be able to have the son experience that, and if it doesn't work out, and maybe he even got let's say worst case scenario, a broken arm or something, and they go to the emergency room, the father would rather use that as a teachable moment to say, okay, we had a bad experience there. What can you have done differently? What will you do differently in the future? And use that to process with the child that bad experience. The mother doesn't see any of that, and the father doesn't usually articulate that well to the mother. And even when the father does articulate that well, it is very challenging for the mom to see that, because she's so focused on the pain the child is going through, and her empathy overwhelms her ability to see the father as anything but an excuse maker. And so these are the types of interactions and dialogues that, because the culture doesn't know enough about, the function of teasing. When dad teases, mom looks at dad and says, one more child, one more father who doesn't understand the difference between abuse and nurturance, and the mother often sees it as abusive. So I'll hear moms say, well, the dad is sort of quasi-abusive, and so I feel I should be the primary parent, as opposed to recognizing that, that teasing is not abuse. It is abuse if it goes too far, but a certain amount of that helps children be able to discern between cues that they're getting in society, and tones of voice, and ways of teasing is oftentimes a prerequisite to criticism that's more direct and more profound, or rejecting or ostracizing somebody. And so all of this has to be the part of the dialogue between moms and dads, because clearly children need to be protected from teasing when it becomes bullying, or too much bullying. And so, but at the same time, when too protected, the child becomes much more vulnerable to the world.
Yeah, I guess mothering's good to a point, and then children have to learn boundaries, and in a world where we kind of do sometimes have to stick up for ourselves.
Yes, and also knowing one of the things that has dropped out of a much more structured culture. When I grew up, maybe 3/4 of the sports that I participated in were pickup team sports. I'd go to the school, which was about a mile from my house, and from a fairly young age, and I'd sort of maybe take a basketball there, shoot the basketball, and some people would either be there already or they wouldn't be, and then people would show up, and I'd make a decision as to whether or not to ask them to play with me. And so whether or not I selected for the people that were coming anew to play with me, or selected to get involved with them, that was a type of decision and that very much prepared me to be an entrepreneur. In fact, there was a whole series of decisions I was making that prepared me for entrepreneurial work, meaning that we would have to decide whether to play half court or full court, where to make the boundaries, how to create teams that were even, but I would always want to have the advantage, and the other person would always want to have the advantage. How to make rules that benefited me versus the other team making rules that benefited them, whether to enforce those rules or not. Those are all the types of things that prepare you for being an entrepreneur, to make your own rules, create your own game, create your own boundaries, know when to enforce those boundaries, know when to let them slide, and so on. And these are wonderful preparations for life, but we've largely given up pickup team sports. We've usually limited ourselves in schools to two types of sports: varsity sports that are team sports, and varsity sports that are individual sports like gymnastics. And so we have a real, whereas what we need to be bringing into our schools, and what parents need to be encouraging our schools to do, is not just to have varsity sports, but to have sports that are the intramural sports that every child can participate in, and to have ways of rewarding the kids who participate in intramural sports, and have it not just individual sports, not just team sports, but also pick-up team sports as well, so that children can learn all three sets of skills. The team sports are excellent for preparing people for corporate work. Individual sports are excellent for preparing kids for discipline and self-starting. And and the pickup team sports are very good for preparing people to be entrepreneurs.
And move forward. Well, with Father's Day just right around the corner, if you could give dads one piece of advice, what would you give them?
I'd say read up how you are contributing to the child's life, what the things you do and don't do that are contributing. Understand. So if you don't understand two things, you're not doing your homework. Number one is that children by the age of 9 who have more father involvement already by the age of 9 have telomeres that are 14% longer than the children who do not have father involvement by the age of 9. Now, telomeres are the part of our cells. Every cell has telomeres in it, and the longer the telomeres are, for complex reasons, the more likely the child is to live. That 14% longer telomere predicts approximately a 14% longer life expectancy. It's the most important single predictor of life expectancy. This is already by the age of 9. So father involvement is so significant that it predicts that 14% longer amount. But your son with father involvement predicts yet again another 40% more greater amount than for your daughter. So start with just the science of the importance of your involvement. Secondly, make sure that you see that you understand that father's dime is much less important than father's time. That is, father's dime, or the money that you make as a dad, is much less important to your family once they have adequate food on the table, once they have a decent roof over their head. After that, the amount of time that you have with your children is far more important on every measurable variable as to how your children, and especially your son, will do than the money you make. So the society will seduce you by what I call social bribes to think of yourself as more successful when you have made more money, or you have a higher status, or you're promoted. But in fact, I'd like to reintroduce not man as old warrior, but introduce the father warrior. Just like the mom had to give up freedom when she has a child, I suggest to every dad on Father's Day to start examining the degree to which your importance is so great that it's not that the great majority of your importance once you have a son needs to be focused on the amount of involvement you have with your children, the way you take camping trips with them, the way you help them explore in nature, the way on car trips you help them play games that increase their curiosity. And I have a lot of examples of these in the book. The way on a rainy day you have a whole series of movies that I talk about that you don't just watch with your children, but you watch them conditionally with your children, on the condition that they talk about it with you afterwards. Yes, over ice cream is fine, but the way that with that movie comes a discussion process that helps grow your children and help them understand the importance of what Dad is doing in the guidance of their lives.
Well, we could talk for hours. I always love spending this time with you and being able to kind of dive more into not just the research you've done, but of course your book, The Boy Crisis, which all the research is coming to fruition in. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
We have. It's funny that you asked that, but when I wrote this book, I said to myself, I don't want The Boy Crisis just to be a book. I want there to be, so we've created a boycrisis.org website that is going up very soon that is including an invitation for a community of readers to share what the problems are and challenges that they're having with their children, which parts of the Boy Crisis book worked for them, which parts there's still a gap between what I say in the Boy Crisis and what is happening with their children, and maybe other parents have different experiences with that. And also for teachers, I have boys in my class that are really having challenges, and they are bullying during recess. So how do I stop that bullying? Should there be less recess? What is the value of recess versus studying more? And discovering that recess is actually more productive for studying than studying itself is, and just knowing all the things that are new that our parents did and our grandparents did not know. I think and sharing that in the community of the Boy Crisis, one of my great hopes is that people will just use this book as a takeoff point to learn from each other.
Well, I'm on your website, boycrisis.org, and people can go there and sign up and be part of your community. It's also got your social media links, which we're connected. Yay. So I get to see all the great things that are going on with you. Dr. Warren-Farrell, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It's been my pleasure to spend many good moments with Marianne.
Well, thank you, Dr. Warren. It's always such a pleasure to spend time with you. Again, if you're looking to connect with Dr. Warren-Farrell, you can do so at warren-farrell.com. His book, The Boy Crisis, is one of many of the great books he's written. But definitely pick up the book, The Boy Crisis. It's available at all major retailers and, of course, on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.